Okay, so they will always be distinct. You may need to dissect it to really see that they're distinct, but they always have those 3 separate parts. You can see that really well in wasps. They always have an exoskeleton, and they always have only 1 pair of antennae. Again, they may be hard to see. They may have been plucked off at some point. Insect life is a little rough, but they always only start with 1 pair as opposed to spiders, which have none, crustaceans, which have 2. So that's a good way to tell the difference. So some other arthropod anatomy, spiders and scorpions are other really good enrichment animals to have, and people are going to ask you the differences between the different types of bugs, because we use the word bug, even though it is a taxonomic term specifying a very individual group of insects, the true bugs. People use the term bug for everything creepy crawling, even worms. So what are the different types of bugs? Well, these are spiders. They are chelicerates because they have fangs, which are chelicerate. Okay, so this is how they eat their food. This is how they can inject their venom. They also have pedipalps. These are elongated mouth appendages. So a lot of people think a scorpion, these pinchers are their arms. It's actually if your arms came out of your mouth. So it's a little bit weird, but it works for them because that's what's been selected for across the millennia. And then they're always going to have 8 legs. Okay, they're going to have 2 more legs than insects. Again, without exception, unless something bad has happened. So why teach about insects? And I think we're good on time. I want to make sure that y'all have a lot of hands-on time with these guys. Why teach about insects? And this is a lot of my personal philosophy, and I think it's important for you to have that too anytime you teach about something. Not just because, oh, I want to teach. Like, why are you teaching about that thing? What do you want people to leave your talk with? So this is what's going through my head as I'm teaching you guys today. Their ecological importance. I showed you how they fit into our world, why they are important. 1, there's so many of them. 2, they are very important in biomonitoring. Have y'all heard of that term before? So that's how you can tell how healthy a stream is, how healthy an ecosystem is, by doing surveys of the diversity of insects, or just the types of species that are there. Certain species are going to be more sensitive, and if they're thriving, then obviously the stream is healthy. They're also really important food sources for a lot of our higher predators. Huge agricultural relevance, okay, both as crop pests and for pollination. Now I know there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, buzz about bees in the media, but we have 2 kind of pollination events happening that are kind of butting heads. So we have the honeybees, we have Apis mellifera, which is what I'm named after, right here, and they are an ecological problem, or they are an economic problem. I just gave away my punchline. So they are an economic problem. They are important to our agriculture. They need to be moved around to pollinate our crops. They are not native. They came from Europe. They are naturalized. So they do not belong in our ecosystem, but they are very important to our economy, our food production. Our native bees, our carpenter bees, our bumblebees, mason bees, things like that, they are important to our environment. One's an economic problem, one's an environmental problem. Saving the honeybees doesn't necessarily mean saving the native bees. So that's also another discussion we can get into, but just something I like to share. And they also have a lot of advantages for humans. So you can use other insects as a form of pest control. So how many of y'all have heard of the kudzu bug? Really? Yeah, okay. 3 years ago, nobody had. I think everybody knows what they are by now. Little teeny tiny smelly insects that love to eat kudzu and love to get into your house and stain your curtains and all sorts of things. But they actually introduced a wasp that specifically feeds on those kudzu bugs, and only those kudzu bugs. So once all the kudzu bugs are gone, so is the wasp. No off-target effects. So you can have biological control in that way. You can also use them as model organisms. How many of y'all are familiar with Drosophila? Fruit flies used in genetic studies. So you can do that. I use mosquitoes as model organisms because the insulin pathway like people with diabetes, they have disruptions in their insulin pathway. Mosquitoes have the same thing. So that's what I was studying for my master's. So you can use them as model organisms. They regenerate very quickly. Not as much paperwork and risk with them. And then entomophagy. So again, 3 years ago, not many people knew what this was, but it's actually eating insects. So how many of y'all have seen the cricket flower? There's cricket flour, cricket protein bars, all sorts of things. And this has become a thing because there's been a lot of concern over certain agricultural industries. Whether or not it's justified depends on who you talk to on certain days. But the heart of the matter is dried cricket flour is an enormous source of protein. And it's an enormous sustainable source of protein, and it's cheap to produce. So that's another reason why so many people are interested in insects right now. Mealworm, crickets, things like that that you can grow en masse, and then just use them as flour as a protein additive. You know, we're not talking about just sauteing up some crickets, even though people do that. But this can be a really, really good resource. Okay, so I've told you about insects. I've told you why to teach with insects. Now I'm going to teach you how. And this isn't necessarily a right or wrong thing. You're going to figure out your own way as you teach, okay? And you can probably insert any animal here. How to teach with raptors, how to teach with reptiles, things like that. So y'all have probably heard this before. But the rule number one is to always cater to your audience, okay? Me speaking to you today, I'm using different vocabulary, I'm using different concepts than I would a room with 5-year-olds. Also, using different concepts than I would a room of senior center, people at a senior center, okay? Different from high school, different from stakeholders. Every audience that you see is going to be different. It's going to present different challenges, and it's going to present different needs, okay? And you're going to need to address those. So this right here, this is, we were manning an outreach table at the Botanical Gardens, and it was a stakeholder event. Basically, people who had donated a bunch to fund grants and see what the College of Ag was doing. And we showed them, this is how we teach with insects and things like that. So obviously, we were kind of teaching very differently than the elementary schoolers right here, who are holding, they're actually holding little cockroaches, which we will hold in a second. And our approach is going to be very different than when we're doing something at Terrapin. So we do Oktoberfest every year. The department does Oktoberfest. But you can find that a bunch of drunken 22-year-olds are kind of similar to 4th graders. You can kind of have the same breakthroughs there. So you can do school outreaches, you can do exhibits, pedagogical events like this Oktoberfest where you're dealing with more adults, trying to break those barriers, and working with stakeholders, okay? And I think, yeah, Dr. Furman has probably told you guys this, but always stay within your comfort zone. Personally, I'm all about challenging yourself and breaking boundaries when you aren't the teacher. So that's the important part to remember. When you need to keep things under control, don't really improvise unless you have to. Don't push your boundaries that day, because if it goes wrong, that's what the kids are going to remember. Not to fuel your nighttime anxiety. But if you get bit by a tarantula, that's what the kids are going to remember, not that cockroaches are cool. So people will notice if you're uncomfortable. So usually I bring a tarantula. We didn't have the tarantula available today. I don't hold tarantulas. I think they're cool and I like them. When I am in control of this classroom, I will not hold the tarantula because I don't feel comfortable with it. And y'all would know. Y'all would know that I don't feel comfortable with it because you would see me shaking. I would stutter a lot more. I was still kind of stuttering because I've got a sinus thing. But you would notice that I am uncomfortable about that animal. Okay, and that's not the impression you want to give, because then other people are thinking, oh, wow, okay, that's confirming my perceptions of this. It is scary. Even the lady in charge is afraid of it. Instead of just keeping it in here, maybe holding it up and saying, isn't this cool? Look at this, look at this, look at this. Nobody's going to think, why isn't she holding it, you know? So that's the important thing to remember. Don't try to show off. Don't try to push boundaries. Keep in control of your environment. arthropods will notice if you're uncomfortable too. Not in the same way that they can smell fear. That's not what I'm trying to say. But your motions are going to be jerkier. You're going to breathe a little heavier. Everything's just going to not be as smooth. Okay, and you're maybe not going to pay attention as much because you're looking everywhere. And they're going to feel unsafe because they're going to feel like you're unsteady. Okay, so that's going to put them on edge, and so that's what I mean by that. And you definitely don't want it to pick up your tarantula then. So the next rule is to know the individual organism that you are teaching about. Okay, so this is the next part of how to teach with insects. So we've got some Madagascar hissing cockroaches here. These are like your standard entry level 4-door sedan insect. They are really easy to keep in colony, but they're big, so kids love to have pictures with them. They make cool noises. Hopefully these do. I haven't tested them today. I didn't want them to get used to it. But they're very easy to keep in colony. You just throw some wood shavings in there. They like fruit. They also eat dog food. A lot of insects you will find eat dog food, so it's pretty easy to keep them as teaching tools. They actually give live birth, which is not very common in insects. Most insects lay eggs. They are detritivores in nature. Who knows what that means? They eat the garbage. They eat leaf litter, they eat decaying matter, things like that. And they make a hissing noise. So they don't have lungs like we do, no arthropods do, but they have these holes called spiracles that they'll pass air through. Okay, that's how they breathe. And in these first two spiracles, in this first segment of the abdomen, that's how they make their hissing noise. So what they do is they'll contract and push air out. And that's how they'll make their hissing. Has everybody heard a hissing cockroach before? You know what a hissing sound is? We'll play with them in a second. We also have leaf insects. I wasn't actually able to get these today. I'm so sorry. They're super cool though. So if you ever can get them from like a reptile show or an insect show or something, highly recommend it. But they have excellent camouflage. They are related to stick bugs, which we can find in Georgia pretty easily if you look hard enough. And they will also sway when they walk. So I won't go too much into these because we don't have any today. Desert millipedes I will get into because, again, we don't have them, but they're really, really good just to have as a teaching tool. Okay, I would add these with Madagascar hissing cockroaches. They're super easy to get, they're pretty cheap, and they're also very similar to a species that we have around here that's red and black, which naturally I like that one. But they're pretty big, and they're easy to hold. They don't even hurt. Sometimes when you hold the cockroaches, they have little hooks on their feet, so it can feel like they're biting you. But these guys, it just feels like a little tickle as they walk across. They're really great for kids. And again, if they get upset, they'll just curl up and harmless. So they will burrow into the soil to find moisture. They are also detritivores. Some of them do secrete a noxious liquid, but as long as you don't eat it, you're fine. So this tarantula is the one I usually talk about. If you have a choice of, say you do have your own classroom, or you are in a space where you want to maintain some sort of resources to teach with for things like this, Chilean rosehair tarantulas are my #1 choice of cool, creepy, charismatic. Okay, those are kind of my 3 rules for that. They have a nice rosy color. They're very docile. There's also Mexican red meat tarantulas, which is more like if you get a plastic tarantula at the store, it's a Mexican red meat. It's covered, it's got the orange bands on it and everything. They are, as their name suggests, found in Chile. They are found in the mountains. They love to burrow into the soil. And a lot of people don't know this, but tarantulas will seldom bite people. Venom takes a lot of energy and resources to produce. And venom is primarily made to immobilize prey. So they're going to bite things that they know they can eat. If a giant picks them up and makes them uneasy, they know they're too big to eat. So they are not going to waste their venom on you because it's not going to immobilize you. It's just going to make you mad. What they're going to do is they're going to shed their hairs. So how many of y'all have touched a stinging nettle or a prickly pear cactus or something like that? Yeah, that's what it feels like. So it's going to be more of a, oh my gosh, drop it, as opposed to, ow, that hurts, I'm going to squish you. So that is their line of defense. And they will essentially pop their stomachs and throw their hairs out at you. And it'll be a little irritating. It's not really going to hurt you unless you're very allergic to them. Never heard of that. But everybody reacts differently. So, and even then, for a tarantula like this, that is very, very docile, to do that, you have to be holding it in your hands, probably shaking it and saying the meanest things to it. It takes a lot to actually get the tarantulas to do that. Now, somebody that we do have today, who I think are so cute, are the death fainting beetles. So these are kind of like the fainting goats of the insect world. They are native to the Mojave Desert. They don't drink water at all. They get all the water they need from the food that they eat because they are desert dwellers. They can live up to 17 years. So that's not saying after 17 years they'll just take the bucket. That's the longest currently recorded death fainting beetle we have. They could live up to 20. And they will basically eat anything. So right now I've got some cat food in there. I've got some celery and some carrots with them. And they're really cool too because they move really slowly. These guys are pretty used to being held, so I don't know that they'll do the whole flop on their back thing. But they do play dead, just like copperheads and other animals, possums, things like that. Oh, possums, things like that. But the difference is you can tell if they're actually dead by whether their legs are sticking up or held into their body. So if their legs are sticking up, they're faking it, because when insects die, their legs are always curled up. That's just what happens to their muscles. So that's a good way to tell the difference. So why do we do this in general? And this is just kind of about teaching and community engagement in general. Again, this is my philosophy. Y'all come up with whatever you want to. But I love to challenge perspectives, and insects are a great way to do that. How many of y'all aren't big on bugs? Like, you don't want to hold the bug. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. See, y'all are my favorite.
That's what I'm told before. It's so neat, not to interrupt you, it's so neat to hear you talk about being comfortable, because this is always, over the years, I've just never been comfortable with insects. And that's why I don't do that in front of the audience. You're right, I don't want anything to go wrong. I don't want them to get hurt, you know.
Exactly, and you will see I will drop a cockroach. I do every year. They're okay, that's what the exoskeleton's for. But that's another reason insects are great. They'll just drop it and keep on trucking. They are going to be fine. But yeah, I love to challenge those perspectives. And you're not gonna, I don't really anticipate any of y'all switching your majors to entomology or even necessarily becoming ag agents. But if y'all become teachers or are in a situation where like, oh, I have this standard I need to teach, and then you think, oh, I learned this about insects that one time, or oh, it'd be super easy to keep a colony of mealworms, let's do that. You know, that's kind of what I'm hoping for outlooks like this. Or if, you know, with middle schoolers or elementary schoolers, if I can get them to like teach them how to put a spider outside instead of just killing it, you know, things like that, have a little bit more respect for them as actual organisms and their importance. That's what I'm going with too. Also, it's a great way for me to connect with the community. So I don't really have much time in my job. I didn't have much time as a grad student either to volunteer a lot. But what I did do is, as part of my job, I get to take these out into the community and work with schools, work with churches, work with senior centers, all that kind of stuff, and challenge perceptions that way. And literally people already know me as the bug lady in Fulton County, because that's just my thing. And you'll find that you have your thing that you like to teach, you feel comfortable with, it gets you excited, and that's what's important too. There are going to be things that you teach that you're like, oh, photosynthesis. I hate this. But you have to have things like this that really get you excited and really get you motivated so you can motivate your kids or your students, whatever age they may be. And then also just instilling a general sense of confidence and curiosity. In this day and age, I'm going to sound like an old woman here, but kids are so in their phones and their iPads. Okay, it's getting more and more. We're getting harder working parents in these generations, and kids are getting technology earlier and earlier. There's less of an appreciation for the outdoors. So really instilling that confidence that they won't die if they go outside, they won't get sick, they won't be eaten by a lion, something like that. That's really important to me, that they can, see a cockroach or see a beetle outside and say, oh, I'm going to pick this up. I'm at least going to get close and look at it and watch it for a second. I'm not going to be afraid of it. I'm not going to kill it. Okay, so instilling that confidence that they can ask questions and they can get closer to nature, it's not as big of a risk as they think. I mean, of course you give them the rules beforehand. I did have a story I was teaching people about, oh yeah, insects are great, look at these bugs. And then there was actually a kid that found a cow killer ant, which I have one here. They are also called red velvet ants. It's like, oh, this one's so pretty. And then tried to chase it to pick it up. And no. If they're pretty, maybe don't pick them up, because that's a warning sign. So you have to kind of balance that. So instill their confidence and curiosity, get them to ask questions before they reach and pick things up. Okay? So, any questions that y'all have? This is the first time I haven't gotten questions off the bat, off my game.
I gotta ask Ms. Melissa, so when teaching with animals, especially insects, are real quick, when something does go unplanned or wrong, we'll call it, can you give us an example of when that happened? Not today, but when that happened and how you dealt with it?
Probably every time I drop a bug. Because it's going to be different. If I drop a bug here, it's going to be different than dropping a bug in a 4th grade classroom. So basically, you just have to kind of have a contingency plan in your head. So a lot of times, if I'm in a classroom like this working with a teacher, it'll be very clear that the teacher has things that she does that gets the kids to pay attention, So if the tarantula crawls out of the cage, be like, teacher, we need everybody quiet. Have that kind of contingency plan in there. But also just always keeping a level head. Never panicking. Nothing is ever worth panicking, and if you have put yourself in a situation that you are panicking, well, you need help. You're going to probably need to call for backup, because that's the whole point of maintaining control of your environment. So if I were holding that tarantula and I dropped it, it's like, I didn't even want to hold it. Now I have to pick it up, and it's mad. So prevention, is worth a pound to cure kind of thing. But if you are in that situation, don't be afraid to call on a teacher or call on somebody else to help you wrangle people. Does that make sense?
That's great, absolutely. Yeah.
And every situation is going to have a different solution like that. But maintaining a level head, I think, is number one.
And I'll give this short story, the tarantula thing. So around Halloween, I would bring a vulture and a barn owl and different scary things to schools around the October time. All this scary, I had a raven, bring the raven, talk about, Well, I'd bring a tarantula. And one day, I was about to, and I didn't like him either, but I kind of faked it, holding the thing. And I do it real quick, all right, let's put it away. Well, this day, I go to get this thing out, and she's kind of, raising up like she's going to bite. And I just said, well, we're just going to look at her inside of her enclosure. So I took a little plastic container and I walked it around. And I just said, it's not worth trying to get her out. I just thought, nope, I'm not going to do this. So just to share with y'all, if you're ever in that instance right before a critter comes out or a snake rears up like it's going to strike you, okay, it's not today. Well, he's just not in a good mood right now, and we're going to wait till later. And that's perfectly okay to do. Perfectly okay to do. It's great point about being confident, cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah.
It's great.
You can fake, even if you don't feel it, you can fake it better than you think. Anything else about anything in general? Yeah.
This is for either one of y'all. So, the exhibition animals things for Georgia DNR, are insects qualified under that, or is can you just get insects and exhibit them?
Yeah. So it depends on the type of insect. I think things like death-bane beetles, they're native to America. If you get best beetles outside, the little log beetles, things like that, I think are fine. Where you get into policy things is when you get like the walking insects, the leaf insects, these little guys, they're native to a 13-hectare region of Peru, so they obviously don't belong here. Exotic animals like that, then you get into USDA inspections and.
Yeah, like you wouldn't want to take a gypsy moth like somewhere and reintroduce
Yeah,
that.
no.
So like
No, invasive insects like that, no,
you
don't.
Yeah, so then you mess around with those, but okay. So,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so anything that could potentially be invasive, you never want to really encourage. You have to get special permitting for that.
And that's the kind of thing, to be honest, Dan, I would call Georgia Department of Natural Resources, their
Yeah.
wildlife division, and they would be able to tell you.
Yeah.
I've always heard having single insects is okay, but if you've got a bunch of them, then they get worried, like, oh my gosh, if they got out.
Keeping them in colony.
Yeah, that's
there
an
is
issue.
there is a difference.
Good question.
Because, I mean, you can buy these guys, you can buy one or two online, but even still, certain species are restricted. You can't even buy them live. So, wow. Cool. So, we have some extra time, right? When does this class
Yes, we
end?
do, it's at 10:20, so we got plenty of
Oh,
time.
we got plenty of
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So what I've got up here are just some teaching tools that I use. The 3 live insects that we have today are the king cockroaches, which if we can get Dr. Furman up here.
I'll do it, I'll do it for you guys, anything for you guys, you know? Oh, yeah.
Oh, you can use. So that's that
Yeah,
insect
yeah,
noise.
there he is. Wow.
So when you're teaching with insects and really any animal that you can potentially hand off, it's important to know how to hand off an insect. So what we do with these guys, and I'll have you guys practice when you come up here to touch them, and he's kind of throwing up a little water. It's okay, it's not.
Well,
It's their thing, they're weird.
They know. I get the
Yeah.
bad end of stuff sometimes.
So you keep it really level in your hands, okay? And these guys aren't really fast, but you can kind of keep a thumb on it to keep them down. And what you want to do is to grab the other person's hand, okay?
Okay.
And make sure you have, especially if this is a kid, because they're going to be like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you plop it in, they're going to be like, no. So keep your hand here, not so you can force them like, no, you are holding this insect, but so you can feel if they're about to pull away, okay? And then what you do is you can just like gently give them a little boop, and then they just go onto the hand. And then you hold their hand for another second, see how comfortable they feel. And then all the way to the second, watch the kid with the bug. Okay, if you're working with young kids, don't have multiple insects out at multiple times. I trust you guys, you know, so we can do that here. But
They really are heavier than you think.
they've got some heft to them.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
really, yeah,
I mean, all I do is send you dog food all day.
yeah. So these guys have been at our house, because when Melissa was
Yeah.
here last week, I got these guys at the house, I got them last weekend before. So they've been at our house for a week, and the other day, Miles goes into the animal room at our house. We have a room that has all the critters. And I see him coming down the hall carrying this thing. No, please don't drop that. Because then I could just see it scurrying off, and I'd have to empty the house to find these. Oh my gosh, yes. But, because he knows Daddy's not a super fan, but they really are, and they're really neat. You know, just to see, and you feel that gripping from
Yeah,
their feet.
so they will not bite you. It's also really important to pass around insects or arthropods that really will not bite. So anything with jaws or with teeth can bite. Whether or not you actually feel it and it hurts is another story. But typically I tell people I use insects and arthropods that don't bite, sting, jump, or fly. They have
Okay.
nothing that they do that will scare you. Anything that will scare you about these insects are your own perceptions. So that's really important because you don't want to have a negative interaction with an animal that has a negative perception. So we've got those, so I'll let you guys check these out in a second. We've also got these little death baiting beetles. I don't
I'm
know.
gonna pass him off to somebody, Miss Bliss, in just a
Oh,
few
there he
minutes.
is.
Look at all
Yeah, but they're really cute. They're the pretty blue color. They have waxy secretions, which gives them that color. Helps them retain moisture a lot better. So you'll see they almost look velvety. So we've got some of these. You can pass, if you want to pass him off, you can, or her, rather. So we've got some of these, so y'all are welcome. There are There is tape on these because also, if you keep insects in colony, you will have insects that you don't want to keep in colony. So there are Indian meal moths and things like that that kind of crawl around. So this tape is just some measures against that. The nasty insects will crawl up the side and get stuck on the tape. So that's how we deal with that. And then in here, you don't need to pick these guys up. They're kind of boring. But I wanted to show you. These are darkling beetles. A lot of times you'll see these. They're a stored grain pest. And basically we feed them oatmeal. But these are such a great metamorphosis lesson because what you can do is you can keep some mealworms. They're just mealworms like you use at bait shops and things like that. Feed them oatmeal, keep them a little bit moist for a couple of months, and then they turn into the beetles. So it's a really cool lesson in that. And you can look in here, they smell kind of bad, but let me shake them up a little bit. And then, yeah, you can see there's the mealworms in there, you can see some pupal forms, and then you can see the adults as well. So it's a little bit easier to see those. So just take a look in here and see the different forms and think about how you could use them as a teaching tool to help teach some standards for different ages. I've also got some preserved insects. You can put her back.
Oh, no, that's
Oh, you good? Okay.
Do you think it's a sheep?
It is a sheep.
Little
Yes.
sheep, okay.
So there is a difference. It may be an immature male because it does have the horns. The males have male cockroaches have very pronounced horns on their shoulders. The females do not have as pronounced.
So that one is
that's definitely a boy. But the females are actually usually bigger too. I don't know what she's saying, but I don't think it's good. So yeah, and then if live insects aren't your speed, you can always get preserved insects. Actually, these are all from my grad school. So we had a big class where we had to collect a bunch of insects. So all these you can find in your backyard in Georgia. So feel free to take a look at those. And then I also have a great example of what a teaching collection looks like if you let kids touch it. Because this looks so nice. And then we let some 5th graders play with it, and it's not so great anymore. But also, I just happen to have an entomology Barbie in my car because I'm a nerd, and everybody thinks of me. When they see anything bug related, it will get me anything bug related. So you better believe when these babies went on clearance at Walmart, I got 5 of them for birthday presents. Oh my God. So never be afraid to, kind of go out of the box for teaching tools. I have this laying around, but when I give a talk at a kindergarten, I have something cool to bring them. So things like that. Be a little flexible, be adaptive, and just try to be a little bit creative. Don't always just make people sit in a classroom and use a PowerPoint all the time. I had to today, but you can kind of think outside the box a little bit there. So if anybody wants to come up and handle the insects or look at the preserved insects, I think now would be the time. Yeah, if we're comfortable.
Can I hand her over to somebody?
Absolutely.
She wants that. I want
it. Yes.
So we're gonna do the same thing, Melissa.
Anybody else want one? Yes. So this is a male. They're not very fast.
It's been a while since they got cold, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's little snakes, I'm okay with it.
Off center.
Then we'll
Yeah,
get the
and
mock
so
and
just
mock
kind of
and
like,
pass it around. Didn't touch it either.
Okay.
if she's feeling like now, she's feeling a little bit more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Good job.
Yeah, so everything's a little off center.
Have no bother.
Anybody want to try the death painting beetles?
Those are cute.
Are cute.
I love to hear that. Cute, that's about insect. That's good. Good news.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I wish we had
I'm glad Melissa does that. Hold them, but
Super
I'm not
easy.
teaching. I just don't feel 100%.
Yeah, just like
You
Gotta
know,
wake- you gotta wake up.
she's absolutely right. Don't do it if you're not comfortable.
We'll do this one.